Welcome aboard Ithaca. First of all, I'd like to tell you about the name Ithaca. We named the boat after the island in Greece called Ithaca. It's the home of Ulysses. And of course, during the Odyssey, he was always trying to get back to Ithaca. But if you read the poem carefully, of course, it's not about getting there, it's about the journey. So we thought that would be a great name for the boat. We bought the boat in 1990. It didn't have many improvements at that time, so just about all the improvements we have made are since that time. We spent a year on the boat going down to the Caribbean, and then in 1998 we left Annapolis and we proceeded south and then west and completed a circumnavigation in 2012. 14 years on Ithaca around the world.
Well, I think Michael and I would have kind of different emphasis on levels of importance of changes that we've made. For me, one of the most important ones was when we bought the boat, there was just one big V-berth up forward. And one thing I knew is if we were going to live on this boat for a long time, we didn't even at the time realize how long it would be, that I would kind of need my own little space. And so we converted that V-berth to a double on one side and storage and kind of a little desk on the other side, and that kind of became my hangout place. We made lots of other changes, of course, to the boat, and some wonderful and very practical ones, but for me that was always a great little space to have for myself.
Well, a number of things. Anyone familiar with Shannon's knows that the deck and the top of the cabin top were always a problem with the Treadmaster product that was molded in to the decks. During a major refit in New Zealand, we actually shaved off that non-skid and replaced it with more conventional non-skid. So it's the only Shannon I know of that does not have that Trackmaster product. A couple other things: we replaced a refrigeration with electric refrigeration rather than engine driven. And at the same time, we converted a storage container in the galley to a deep freezer. So we have a separate freezer and refrigeration, of course, as well. We replaced the engine in the early 2000s and a number of other improvements over the years. Well, first of all, the draft is 5 feet. It's a very traditional full keel. It's really never been a problem. We've spent a lot of time in the Bahamas and very enjoyable. Never really had any issues with the draft. But it is a very stable boat offshore as well. We have roller furling on both the headsail, the Jenny, as well as the staysail, all controlled from the cockpit, very easy to do. We have a stack pack on our mainsail so that you don't have to worry about dropping it and then having to put all of the straps around it. It drops right into the bag. We repowered, as I mentioned earlier, about 12 years ago. We've got a very modern Yanmar engine that is a really great asset to the boat. We've never had a problem with it. So it's a very easy boat to sail, very reliable, and very dependable. We've got a line wrapped around a drum back there that we can use in the Mediterranean for Mediterranean moors, put an anchor on it. There's a number of things like that with the boat.
And the autopilot.
And the autopilot, of course. One feature that doesn't jump out at you, I think it's in the listing. When you're overseas, of course, we're probably the only country in the world that has 110 volt power ashore. Everybody else is 240. And so we have a plug for 240, and the boat is wired for 240. At the throw of a switch, you can be on European power.
Well, I think she sails beautifully, not so much pointed up to the wind, but a little off the wind. And we sailed across the Pacific, and we had 2 head sails up, and it was just weeks and weeks of glorious, wonderful sailing. She also does very good. You feel very safe in really heavy weather. I don't think I've ever been nervous, maybe, but not really ever afraid.
Yeah, when we do route planning, we plan 120 miles a day. That's 5 knots for 24 hours. But we have had some really great days, particularly crossing the Pacific, where we would make 180, 190 mile days and very, very comfortable. There were some days crossing the Pacific where we didn't touch a sheet for several days. It was just absolutely beautiful sailing.
Well, at dock or on the hook, it's tremendously comfortable, largely because of this wonderful cockpit, which really kind of gives you a big backyard to kind of play in. It's also fun to have space to have, other yachties over for a drink or two, which we did from time to time. At sea, the boat is tremendously comfortable, I think. Even in bad weather, I would make bread, I would cook, I have an oven, Now, obviously there are times when it's less comfortable than others, but never again did I feel afraid or, like I wanted to call mother go.
Well, my favorite place that we visited, we were there for almost a year and a half, was New Zealand. We love the people there. We love the culture. The food is great. And of course they speak the language. So New Zealand was probably my favorite. Now Marguerite, I think her favorite area was the Mediterranean, and particularly Italy. And I'll let her talk about that, as well as some of the other wonderful places we visited.
Well, I did. I loved so many of the places we went, and I'm particularly interested in art and art history, so I love the Mediterranean, and we spent almost a year and a half in Fiumicino, just outside of Rome, so we had a lot of time to really explore that. But I will say, too, that some of my most fondest memories of being on this boat is when it's a beautiful, calm night in the middle of the ocean. There's a big moon, and you're just scooting along on the surface of the water. It's so peaceful. I had great memories of that. And there are lots of other ones, and I'll point out that I did spend the last couple of years writing a book based on all the journal entries that I kept during that trip, and it's called Waterborne, A Slow Trip Around a Small Planet. This is a boat that's been in our life for such a long time, so many wonderful things we've shared, and we really love it. So I think what we would really hope is that someone buys it who would love it as much as we do, who would have as much fun on it, and take off and have wonderful wild adventures. And so her life will continue in different places with different people.
Well, the first one is we both turned 80 this year, and we were fortunate enough last year to charter a canal boat in France, and we really fell in love with that lifestyle. It's a little slower pace than being on a sailboat, but we found that it's a lot of fun, and we're looking into making that our next boating experience.
Well, I think if you're particularly interested in sailing offshore, going down to the islands and maybe even going beyond that this is really the perfect boat, because it's comfortable, it's very well built, it's been very well maintained. There are just so many things about it, just like the space along the deck there. It's really easy to go back and forth, the way the shrouds are configured, just infinite things that are different from other boats, and we've been on many of them that make this boat special.